Dynasty the king.
How much of the preseason hype was all smoke, and how many players are really going to be fantasy superstars for you? If that's your question, it's ours too. This is the Dynasty Exchange. I'm joined, of course, by Davis Noemi and Dylan Egloff, the two best hosts and the two best co-commissioners for the greatest fantasy league on earth. But gentlemen, as we enter into the season, we had to bring in some outside help. Joining us today is NFL insider Mr. Charles Robinson. Guys, can we give it up for Charles? Can we give a little clap for Charles for taking out the time?
How you doing, boys?
A little snaps.
How you doing?
Charles,
Good.
it's fantastic to have you, man. And just a little context. We actually already have somewhat of a pre-existing relationship with you. Is it fair to say we know you decently well at this point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I've gotten sucked into the Dynasty League black hole with you guys. It only took about 10 days before I got accused in my household of Davis's name being code for like some jump off. Why is Davis calling you at 1 a.m? There's no way that's fantasy related. And actually there's a boss in my company named John Shaw, and I was just having a conversation with someone. I kept saying Josh Walsh. And they're like, who the hell is Josh Walsh? And I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm starting to say these guys' names. And it was like creeping into my subconscious and every single thing I do in life. Yeah, it only took literally like 2 or 3 weeks before it. I was told I needed to delete the sleeper app after about 3 weeks.
Well, it sounds like you fit in just like one of us. For the listeners, Charles is not a part of the Yacht Club, although if we do expand again, no question, he's on the short list to add. But during the expansion season, we formed another league, and Michael was kind enough to connect us with some industry people, some NFL insiders, and it became apparent to us right away that Charles not only knew fantasy and was going to be absolutely diabolical to play against in Dynasty, but we realized what we thought we knew about the NFL was like a drop of water compared to the ocean. So we are so excited to have you here today because as fantasy players first, bro, we've got some questions. And I want to start off with the number one question I want answered selfishly for a number of leagues, which is, what is Jonathan Taylor's contract situation? All three of us felt like there's no way this guy holds out or doesn't play, like he's going to stay with the Colts. And then he gets thrown on the pup. So all that being said, can you just give us a quick understanding of what JT's options are, maybe what the Colts' options are? Just educate us, man. Like, is he going to play this season?
Yeah, I think really what happened here in Indianapolis that was interesting is I think the Colts felt like he wasn't going to take a regular season snap when it started. They feel like this is a hold-in. They're not going to say it publicly, but they feel like he's healthy enough to play. And their options are limited. And so I think that's how he ultimately ends up on the PUP list, which scratches him for 4 weeks. But I don't think it's over yet. Look, the October 31st trade deadline is going to factor here. I do still think there's a chance that Miami is a player after the 4-week suspension. I think depending on how Green Bay's season goes, like Green Bay's so young at the skill positions around Jordan Love, they really want to add, I think, another concrete piece. And if that means even in a backfield with a lot of depth, I would have to think one of those guys would be included in the trade, either Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. But both of those teams, I think, as long as they get off to a decent start, could still factor before October 31st. But the upside for Indianapolis is there are some teams that don't know what their situation is going to look like by October 31st. They could be like the 49ers last year approaching the trade deadline going, hey, you know what? We got a shot. We got a shot right now. This is where we make the run at Christian McCaffrey. So I think what they're thinking is there could be another team out there that could get involved a little more heavily. And interestingly enough, it never came up, but I'm telling you, I do think, and I don't know if it's just because Howie Roseman likes to be involved in every single guy who's available,
trade.
But the Eagles never came up publicly. But I do think Howie Roseman at least pondered, hey, we've got a big committee situation here with our backfield. Is there any way we could figure out how to do this? I think that the burden is that contract extension that's got to go along with this. You're not just giving up assets; you're giving up a massive contract extension. I think Taylor plays this season. I really do, but I think a lot of that destination comes down to how do teams start and how do they feel as they're rolling toward the end of October about whether or not they're in a Super Bowl window now, because that's the player you acquire. If you're in a Super Bowl window, you go get Jonathan Taylor.
So you're telling me there's a chance at a Taylor Swift backfield in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think like look, I'm not going to say realistically with what they paid Jalen Hurts, right? A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith down the line. Like, you have the contract situations are going to get pretty rough for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's going to eliminate a lot of the middle class on that roster. So to add another top end guy who's a running back, I can't rule out Howie Roseman though, because he gets involved in every single player who becomes available who has talent. I feel like he makes a call. I think they're not likely, but at the same time, I would never rule out Howie Roseman. I do think there will be a third team, probably not the Eagles, but there will be a third team we're not talking about right now.
So, Charles, assuming probably worst case scenario for the Colts and for him that he stays on that team, do you see a way that he actually does sit out the entire season? Because like what type of impact does that have on his like contract going into next year?
Well, first off, his contract would toll, so it would
right?
not. Yeah, I mean, it would toll, which means that
he'd be in the same situation
a year from now. So, no, I don't. I think that if it looks like a situation where he absolutely has to play, he's going to sit there and go, okay, when does the year become vested for me? So when do I come in and get this counts as an accrued season, and where I'm not in the same situation a year from now? But the problem that he has there is if he comes off the 4-game seat, the PUP list seat, and he's going to continue to hold in, the Colts may suspend him. Like, I don't think it's really going to happen, but I think the Colts may say, you are healthy, you're good to go, you're ready to play. We feel like we have grounds now to suspend you. I don't even know if that's possible, because you'd have to prove it. You'd have to prove that he's healthy, and I don't know that you can necessarily do that, and I don't know that he's done anything else to basically be conduct detrimental at this point to the team. He wants this season to count. I think he does. Okay. And weirdly enough, when I was going through the camp tour, I did have one GM who's very dialed in. And he said, you know what? I will bet you they get that deal done with them. And I'm like, after all the animus, the acrimony, I'm like, I just don't see it happening. But he's like, look, I'm just telling you, I think there's a chance that they get their start with Richardson under their belts, and they look at the situation and they go, all right, how much money are we really talking about committing here? I mean, is it like $9 million? Are we $9 million apart over a 3-year span? Because it's going to be 3 years of guaranteed money. Really, realistically, is it worth us being petty about $9 million to potentially hurt our rookie quarterback? But I think Richardson does have to get off to a decent start and put them into a position where he's needed, maybe even more than he's needed right now, which is, I mean, this is a major need as it is, and yet they still haven't been able to get it done.
So speaking of AR, because obviously we know that Dylan loves him some Anthony Richardson. Do you think they should have? Yeah,
who doesn't?
Well documented. Yeah, right. Do you think that they should have started Gardner Minshew and then let him progress, or do you think because he didn't have that long of a career that the reps were needed?
So if you'd asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I would have said, this is nuts. I don't believe all the BS that's coming out of practice. I could have cussed there. I didn't, guys. I saved you one there. No bleep there.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to say it. 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting there and I'm going, I'm so tired of hearing how great he looks in practice, and he's got the cannon and this and that. And it's just, at some point you get tired of hearing how wonderfully talented and amazing he is right now on every level of the team. Ownership, front office, the players are coming off the field, and you're just like, dude, like, enough. All right, maybe let him go out. Don't put all this expectation on him now. And so at that time, I was like, they're nuts. I don't think they should start him. Get Minshew out there. Let him get beat up a little bit. Let the offensive line, which is still, I can't believe how subpar the Indianapolis Colts offense. Like Quentin Nelson, I don't know what happened to that guy.
He's completely fell apart. It's insane.
It is. It's one of the biggest mysteries in the NFL how quickly his game has just completely fallen off. And after injuries, whatever. But now that said, when the Trey Lance trade to Dallas happened, and I started talking to teams about like, why is this such a bad fit with Dallas? And they're like, it's about reps. And I listened to them talk over and over about how much Trey Lance needed the reps because he had less than 100 throws in high school. He had like 300 throws in college. He had, it was just like he was on basically sitting around 500 throws as a starting quarterback, like period. And they just talked over and over about, hey, you got to get the reps. You got to get the reps. You got to get the reps. It made me reconsider the Anthony Richardson situation because to me, I'm like, okay, now through this prism, he needs reps. You got to get him the reps. It sucks. Maybe you got to put him through a little bit of a grinder. But you got to get him those reps somehow. You can't wait forever. And if they feel like they got to kickstart it now, because as you said, he just didn't have that amount of experience, I'm willing to consider it, but it's risky. All these rookies that are starting this year, I mean, it's all risky because of the mental health of them. And I'll share one thing with you, like the Jets and the tail end of the Zach Wilson thing. I think what the Jets learned through that whole experience was we should have known he needed a redshirt year. Like, what were we thinking? Like, we didn't think he needed a redshirt year. We should have looked at our line and we should have said, we got to give this guy a redshirt year and not screw him up mentally. That's what I think about with some of these rookie quarterbacks.
It's crazy because like you watch Hard Knocks and like you see them literally saying to Zach Wilson, have fun, have fun, have fun.
Over and over.
How many guys kept saying, have fun, have fun? It's like, geez, he really was in his head. Sorry, Josh, what were you saying?
No, speaking of the Jets, Charles, as I mentioned, we do play in a Dynasty League together. The biggest trade I've done with you surrounds a former Jet. And it was a guy who was a Dynasty darling 2 years ago. And then he felt left for dead. And I'm talking about Elijah Moore. He was with Zach Wilson, and certainly they did not seem to make a good connection. It seemed like only Mike White could bring out fantasy goodness of him. But you charged me a pretty penny for Elijah Moore. I think it was literally all the picks I had left. And I didn't have much, but it was everything I had. Were you just like hyping up his value and kind of lying to me about what's going on at camp, or is Elijah Moore hype real? Do the Cleveland Browns have a weapon, and is Deshaun Watson going to unlock him like he did with Will Fuller as a wide receiver too?
I don't think there's any question. Like any, I wouldn't even call him a 2. I would call him like a 1B because of how they play. Now, here's the thing. He has to stay healthy, right? Because they're going to use him in ways that's going to put him in more peril than when he was with the Jets. He's going to have like sort of that semi-Debo Samuel role where they'll move him out of the backfield at times. They're going to give him some carries. There's going to be some reverses, some sweeps, things like that. The thing, like one of the craziest things that kind of happened in camp that I thought was interesting, anytime you go through a camp, they ask you, where else are you going? Where have you been? And when I would bring up, hey, I'm going to go see the Jets, I literally had 2 GMs. The first thing they asked me after I said the Jets, they phrased it differently, but both were like, why did they trade Elijah Moore? Like, what happened there? Like, there was value. They were like, wow, he's a really good player. Like, why would you get rid of a player like that? And look, I think he needed the fresh start. He didn't want to be there anymore. He felt so burned by the quarterback situation. I think he felt burned by the front office and the coaching staff. Felt like, they weren't always backing him the way that he could have been backed when he was getting torn apart in the media. And as soon as he got to Cleveland, though, when I talked to Andrew Berry, I'm like, let's talk about this acquisition, the GM of the Browns. And he's like, trust me, he's going to be a huge piece of our offense. He's exquisitely talented. Everything that you saw in that first year in the league, he's ready to take the next big step that he wasn't able to take because of what went down with the Jets and Zach Wilson. And then we saw it in the preseason, but we also saw him get hurt. And so it's like, he's got to stay healthy. They're going to use him in a lot of different ways. I'm just telling you, Amari Cooper's great, but I think Deshaun Watson almost looks at him like Brady looked at Edelman. Like, that's my guy.
Wow.
Like, that's my guy.
Jeez.
Like, if I'm in trouble, that's my guy. I'm going to find him. He's going to be in the slot. Sometimes he's going to be outside. Sometimes it's going to be a scramble drill, but that's the guy that I'm constantly going to be looking for.
That's really
so you're
exciting.
saying this Browns offense is going to look completely different then? Because in the past it's been pretty run heavy, but I mean, they brought in, they paid Deshaun Watson a lot. They went and traded for Elijah Moore. They traded for Amari Cooper. So I'm anticipating this offense is probably going to look significantly different.
Yeah, well, Njoku's, I think they're looking at this as being a team that can be far more diverse from a passing standpoint. Now they have the quarterback to do it. They have the tight end who's going to factor obviously hugely in the passing game. And then they have a number 1 receiver. They have a number 2 receiver, Donovan Peoples-Jones. You have a legitimate 3 receiver that they really like. So I think they feel like the depth and the sort of versatility of the weapons is going to open it up for them. They still need the offensive line to stay healthy. Okay. They still need to have that running game, but, and frankly, really what this all hinges on, I'll be real here. It's Watson. Like, Watson has to be able to show I can be the Houston Texans Watson. I'm not the guy who showed up halfway through the season. Yeah. He's just got to be out of his head, play free again. And at times in the preseason, I thought he looked like he was, getting back to that Texans player. So we'll see.
You mentioned
Question for you guys.
Oh, go ahead.
Would
Dylan.
you guys take Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore in Dynasty?
Elijah Moore for me.
Elijah
Based on, I mean,
Moore.
Charles just confirmed for my heart
Elijah
everything
Moore?
I need
Charles,
to hear.
what about you? Elijah Moore or Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, I would
Dynasty.
take Elijah because
Wow.
Judy. I like Judy, but here's my issues with Judy. Number one, I'm scared about injury with him. Okay, because he's had some soft tissue stuff. Number two, I'm scared about the hands because he's had hands issues there. And number three, well, I'll take it to four. Number three, he's playing with Russell Wilson, who
He has a Russell Wilson problem.
we don't know. I mean, we don't know. We're still figuring that out,
Yeah,
right? Like we
that's
assume
fair. Yeah.
Sean Payton's going to change this overnight. I went through there. I'm telling you the thing I was concerned about. I'm sitting there and I'm watching practice. I'm like, why is Greg Dulcich running with the twos? Like, why is Adam Troutman
That's
their
insane,
number
man.
one tight end? You know what I realized?
call,
Adam Troutman's sitting there going, I can handle combo blocks. You know why he needs to handle combo blocks? Because the offensive line's struggling. And if the offensive line goes in the season and struggles, and they got to have Adam Troutman out there, and Russell Wilson could still be getting hit, Jerry Jeudy to me is I don't think the running game's as good in Denver. I don't think the offensive line has the talent that Cleveland's does in totality. And frankly, I don't think the surrounding skill position pieces are as good in Denver as they are in Cleveland, which I know some people say, well, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul when you have all these good players. I would normally say yes, except that Watson and Elijah Moore are on such a vibe. I'm like, all right, I think sometimes that canceled things out.
That fires me up to hear. You mentioned that Elijah Moore would be used a little bit like Debo. I know that there's been a lot of hype around Nick Chubb in fantasy circles that he's finally going to get unlocked in the passing game. When you shared that, though, my thought was they're not going to use Nick Chubb that way. It sounds like they're just going to be using different formations to utilize pass catchers. Is Nick Chubb getting a bump in passing game, or is that all kind of like...
No, I like Chubb. No, I like Chubb because I think first off he's got the backfield. Like Kareem Hunt had lost a step anyway, but I mean really it's Chubb back there now. They know it. I think they want to get their bang for the buck, right? They're paying him, okay? And I don't know if there's going to be another Nick Chubb contract extension coming, which means whatever production you got, jam it into this contract.
Empty the tank. Gotcha.
Right, empty the tank on this contract extension. And with Elijah Moore, he's not going to get 5-6 carries a game. Okay. He's not going to get, he'll steal a couple, a game based on whatever's going on situationally. And, look, it's all going to, whether or not he factors coming out of the backfield and catching a lot of passes, I think it depends on how well the other players around him are playing. I mean, if Cooper has a great year and Moore has a great year and Njoku has a great year, they're not going to need him as much as maybe they would. So, we'll have to wait and see. But I think from a carries perspective, and I think a red zone perspective, he's going to have the ball a hell of a lot. I think he's going to be fine from a running perspective.
It's awesome to hear.
I think I'm stoked on Elijah Moore. I think it's refreshing to hear that they actually value him because it was so frustrating if you were a manager of him whenever he was in New York. You saw whenever he was given the opportunity, he exploded, right? He had top 10 wide receiver weeks with Zach Wilson. So it's going to be interesting to see how that Browns offense plays out. So we've got a bone to pick with you while you're here. It's more of a bone amongst us that we want you to settle for us.
I already feel like I know where this is going.
Hey, Josh and Davis know exactly where this is going. So I have this thing where I do not believe that Justin Fields is going to be worth all of this hype. And I know you were around the Bears camp. I know you went to a Bears game this preseason. So maybe you can settle this bone to pick. I don't believe that the coaching staff is equipped to develop a quarterback like Justin Fields because to me, coaching is huge. When it comes to a quarterback, we've seen so many quarterbacks get ruined because of poor coaching, right? Like we talked about earlier, we talked about Zach Wilson getting rushed out there and Trey Lance getting rushed out there. So I think that what I saw at the end of last year, did we see Justin Fields get a little bit better at passing? Sure. But we did not see him actually sit in the pocket and throw the ball. They just let him run silly until he got hurt. So, Charles, what do you think about that?
Can DJ Moore be Stephon Diggs? Okay. So when we talk about Josh Allen, right? Whenever we talk about Josh Allen, it was like, man, look at the progression 1 to 2 to 3. The first 3 years, you saw these jumps. Well, Diggs really was I think he was that element that kind of brought it all together. Gave him a guy who he's explosive, he's big time, he's all pro talent. I can trust this guy, I can throw it to him, he's going to go get the ball. He has kind of a killer mentality. Can DJ Moore be that? And I will say this, DJ Moore, a couple of times he gets touches, he's making huge explosive plays. And
it's preseason.
Love it.
It's
Oh,
great
come on.
too
It's-
that he doesn't have to do it 20 yards downfield. Like, because to me in the Panthers offense, I was like, man, everything was always, a lot of the deep stuff for him. It was intermediate to deep, and like, how creative could you be? He looks. I was not a big believer, in that addition. I'm like, he's I don't know if he can be that ironclad number one that you need. And then, he's kind of looked like he's worked well. What makes me nervous with Fields is that he's always going to lean into, I think he is a first read guy. I think he has become a second lead. He's better at the second read. I don't know how often he gets to the third read rather than going, okay, now this is where I run. The running's great in fantasy leagues, but it's a depreciating asset because you get killed. You get hammered.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? He is not built like Josh Allen, and even Josh Allen gets the crap kicked out of him when he runs.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried. I love it when he runs, by the way. Like, he reminds me of Michael Vick. Like, that's the last time I saw a guy last season, the way he was running. I'm like, oh my
He's
God.
electric, man.
It's unreal. It's unbelievable. It's just the gear he has. There's like no one else in the league that has it in that moment that he does. But again, I think it's a depreciating asset. They don't want him to continue to lean into that game. They want him to get to the third read, right? And, we have to wait and see, can he do that, or is he going to continue to lean into running the football? I don't know. The confidence of the coaching staff, it's hard for me to know whether or not I should have confidence until I see it. If you had asked me about Brian Daboll before seeing the development of Josh Allen, I would have been like, I don't know this guy can develop. And then he developed him. He left and he made Daniel Jones a decent player.
The difference is, the difference would be like Brian Daboll. I mean, he's a great offensive mind. I mean, we're relying on Eberflus here, and I don't know that Eberflus as the head coach he's a defensive minded coach.
Defensive coach.
Like, does he actually know what to do with a quarterback that needs intentional development?
Well, they knew. I will say this, the entire organization knew the first thing they needed to do was add talent around him. They did that. Okay. So, and I'm like, all right, that was the first right move that we've seen, is to make talent additions. And, but I don't know. I can't call Fields is rich. I will say this. The Fields love is rich at this point. He is still a very unknown commodity. And that's exactly it. You have to decide, is this too rich? Like it's an either or here. You're either there's no like, oh, I'm kind of, Justin Fields is okay. You're either like, oh my God, he's gonna be the greatest. Or it's like, I don't know, man. Like, that's a little scary right now. It's still too early to tell.
Too rich. Give me a rich.
Oh God!
I don't know about that. I don't know about
that. The guy that has no collegiate production. So, Charles, do you think that the Bears front office takes into account and kind of hitches to the Fields wagon just because they had the opportunity with having the one-on-one and then trading it away? Like, are they? And I know Fields is going to be coming into a contract here pretty soon. So, do they feel some type of commitment to him? Although there is no, contract extension, because they had the one-on-one in their hands and a Bryce Young.
Well, I think, look, it's year 3, right? So any quarterback worth their salt after year 3, you go to the table, right? You're talking about contract extension. So I think they want to know. You want to have a lot of clarity. Like, I go back to, I remember when like Cleveland was going into year 4 with Baker without having that contract extension done. And Baltimore was going into year 4 with Lamar. And both those organizations were like, oh my God, like, this is not a fun place to be right now. It's not, right. We should want to rush and get this deal done right now. And both guys, for kind of different reasons, there was a little bit of reticence. I think the Bears they're going to give him every opportunity to prove he's going to be another, $50 million, APY quarterback down the line. So, I think, look, the commitment's there. There's zero question to me. Like, I forget the kid's name. The only surprise, honestly, at the quarterback position that's happened in with the Bears was that backup. Like, yes. I can't think of the kid's name, but like, this kid comes
Division
out of
Division 2 quarterback.
Division 2 QB. I wish I could remember his name right now, but like, and he just like takes the backup position. You're like, oh my God, that's like. But come on, man. This entire season for the Bears, everything is leveraged on Fields. Like, I would say the entire organization, because if it does not work, you're considering in 2024, like, okay, now we're straddling the fence. We're either, it's got to work in 2024 or we're rebuilding. Because if Fields doesn't work, you're rebuilding. Unless the roster's so good that you can go out and grab a veteran and turn the key on it like the Jets did with Aaron Rodgers. But that's, man, I don't know. That's a tough position to be in. They need Fields to work. They're going to do everything they can to make sure it does.
Speaking of rebuilding, as a dynasty player, there are certain players that you need to sell and get off your roster after a certain point. There are 2 veteran wide receivers that come to mind that are kind of past the point, in my opinion, of selling them to get off your roster, and you may just have to hold them and squeeze them for whatever they're worth. The 2 that come to mind for me are Mike Evans and then most recently Cooper Kupp, because it seems like the hamstring injury has flared up again. I know you're in cartel, you're like tanking for 2024. You're not trying to win now as far as we know. But if
I had one of those receivers. I had Odell. I had Odell Beckham. I had one of those guys. I got rid of them.
But what's the fantasy outlook for these guys? Not just this year, long term. Is it the end completely? Or are we seeing the cliff, or is this just a lull and don't panic too early? Do we need to have diamond hands, or do we need to get them off our rosters? Cooper,
I mean, the soft tissue stuff is devastating to the Rams, because I'm telling you right now, with that wide receiver collection. And Matt Stafford being who he is, okay, like he might be having issues connecting with younger players. Now with Cooper, like that is like his guy. He would have thrown at Cooper 200 times this season if Cooper was available for 17 games.
That's painful to me.
Absolutely, which is why that soft
as the Cooper Kupp owner, multiple leagues.
Yeah. I mean, it's when I went through the Rams, it was like, I think I was sitting with Les Snead, the GM, and I think I kind of pissed him off because I'm like, look, man, I'm like, you still got the Holy Trinity. And he was like, who's the Holy Trinity? I'm like, Aaron Donald, Matt Stafford, Sean McVay. He was like, I think it's more of the Trinity. You're leaving out Cooper Kupp. And like, he went on this whole thing about, having Cooper Kupp back and how important that is. And then the soft tissue thing happens. And now he's got to see a specialist. And it feels like people are like, well, he might not play week 1. I don't know, man. Like that's the kind of situation where, especially when it's like hamstring related, it's like, if we push him back a little too early and he aggravates it again, he can miss a month in the middle of the season. So do we just shut him down, take the opinion of a couple different specialists, and then maybe go back to him in October and see how we feel about it? That's kind of, I think, what they're juggling right now is how much they want to push it. But yeah, I think
so. IR is a possibility.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a possibility. I think they have to. I do. I think they have to consider, like
that's huge.
How do they want to handle this? What's the severity and what's the percentage chance of recurrence? If he sits a week to 2 weeks to
30 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a huge different ballgame. Who did you say beyond Cooper Kupp?
Mike Evans. Mike Evans has also had, yeah.
Mike Evans. God, I hope he gets traded to the Giants. Mike Evans. DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham Jr. You're going to have to hang on to all these guys and just squeeze and get as much out as long as you can. And then they're not going to be worthless. And it's just how it is in a dynasty league. But I do think there's a position for all of them to be valuable. Okay. Now, Mike Evans, the thing about Evans Evans at times would get frustrated with Brady. Okay. And like, not like open frustration, just sort of like,
he's that much of a dog.
No, he's not a dog. I just think it's like,
he's a competitor.
He's like, he wanted,
there were times. Way.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, he wanted Tom to always trust him, right? Like whether you see separation or not, it's not a 50-50
throw it up
situation.
to me. I'm going to get it. Yeah.
I'm still an 80-20 guy. Like just trust me.
Right.
And he and Brady worked through that. I think they were fine. They were always fine. But with Baker, historically has not gone well. Like, and so when Baker starts to frustrate Mike Evans, which is why I said, man, I hope he gets dealt to the Giants. I think it would be a more advantageous position for him to be with a guy like Daniel Jones, even though some people would be like, I don't understand that. Well, okay. Hodgins, I think Darren Waller, I wasn't big on the Darren Waller acquisition, but it was funny because when I was in the trail, like talking to different GMs, and Waller came up a couple of times, and everybody seems to think like pro personnel guys, they're all like, no, it's perfect. Like where he's going is really good for him. They all think he's going to have a really nice season. So for Evans, I think you get more juice for the squeeze if he's in a place like New York. I really do. But all those guys that I mentioned, I mean, I think they can all contribute. I had questions about Hopkins when I went through Titans camp and I watched him. Like, no, he's still got something to give here. Odell, I think Odell can be still a very, very good player for the Ravens. But you're just going to have to hang on to him and try to get as much out as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Or trade him. So if you can find a sucker, trade him.
Trade him for what though? Trade him for what?
Yeah.
So
a second.
So if somebody comes with a 24 second to you, are you taking that for any of these players? not Cooper Kupp, right?
I was about to say we
No,
exclude Cooper Kupp.
Not Cooper, because
How about a Mike Evans? If somebody comes with a 24-second, are you taking that?
If it in this draft, if you think it's the top, like it depends how deep your dynasty league is. Okay, so how many teams?
Sure. Yeah,
so, but if you're
economies,
so here's I would say if you are looking at if that second round pick you think it projects in the top 15 of the next draft, I would do it because I think this draft is going to be crazy deep. Like it's going to be crazy deep with offensive players, some guys that we don't even know right now. We're going to learn it's coming.
Sure. Yeah.
And here's one of the things that when you talk to GMs, this is fascinating to me. You will hear GMs tell you, like, we have more tape and better tape on guys than ever before because of NIL. Because guys stayed. Like guys who would have gone didn't go because of NIL. Blake Corum probably would have gone. If NIL didn't exist, like he would have just said, screw it, I'll take a redshirt year in the NFL, get closer to a free agency contract. I'm a running back anyway. But because of NIL, Blake stayed. And I had a couple of GMs who were like, we have really good tape and we're probably going to make better picks because of the fact that we have an overwhelming amount of tape. And some guys that might have come out earlier instead stayed and developed a little bit more. So
are you saying there's a chance that Caleb Williams stays till 2025? There's not a chance, right? There's not a chance. Right?
Wait.
No,
here's the crazy, and this would murder me. Okay, this would murder me, right? Because I destroyed my entire team to get Caleb Williams, right?
For this guy single-handedly.
So Charles drafted a brand new team and then sold every single player on it. Like he didn't even let them play a game.
He's a genius.
Like,
He's a genius. But yes.
But he has plenty of 24 and 25 picks though. So
all right. So Charles, tell us about Caleb. Is he going?
Okay.
Is there a chance?
So here's the thing about Caleb that makes me think there could be a chance. Number one, he's doing Wendy's commercials, guys. Like he's doing Heisman House commercials. Okay, like the dude is making a ton of money off the field already, which is wild. And USC has the base of donors to pay to see him stay. And like talk about like Reggie Bush was born way too early because Reggie Bush is a guy who, and I think he's the guy who's in the Caleb Williams like territory where it's like Reggie Bush would have made a professional salary staying one more year at USC. They would have paid to get him the professional salary.
Seriously.
I think Caleb, now here's the thing. Caleb's going to have agents in his ear and they're going to tell him the same thing every high level quarterback hears from every good agent. Start your free agency clock as early as you can. Get to the league as fast as you can. And especially if you're the first overall pick, get to the league, start your clock. By the end of your career, it's going to be a $40 to $50 million decision to stay. Are you going to recoup $40 to $50 million with the next year in college? Now, some quarterbacks might go, okay, well, over the length of my career, I'm going to make $500 million. I'm fine. So if Caleb's that guy and he believes in himself, maybe he ultimately stays, but they will pull out all the stops. And, I think who he has in terms of his agency, I don't know if it's CAA or whoever's doing his NIL stuff. If he goes out and wins another Heisman this year, they could potentially go, hey, you know what? As long as you sign with us, when you do decide to turn pro, we'll go out there. We'll try to get you $20 million off the field. We can figure it out. Like, let's call Rolex. Let's call.
That's insane, man. That is insane.
What a different world, man.
Crazy.
What a completely different world.
Totally wild.
Yeah. So we talked about Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, I think all of us would agree, is the unquestioned 101 in Dynasty, right? If you have the 101 and 24, it's going. If he goes right
in Superflex,
he's declaring
Superflex.
in Superflex. Sorry.
Yeah.
In Superflex leagues, he's going to be the 101. The 102.
Yeah, here we go. I like this. Yeah, let's talk about 102. Let's get to 102.
Yeah, the 102 right now, it could be a toss-up for some, but for me personally, it's still Drake Maye. In Superflex leagues, it's going to be Drake Maye. So we saw this past weekend, college football finally got kicked off. We saw Drake Maye in action. We saw all these guys that we're about to talk about in action. What is your takeaway of Drake Maye? Because you looked excited about it. What do you got to say about that?
He last year kept a staff employed. Like when you talk to people in NFL, you're like, look at the surrounding pieces at North Carolina. Like, how good is this kid? And there are some people that will argue he's a better player than Caleb Williams. They get it. Like, they're like, is he going to go first? No, not as long as both guys stay healthy and they meet their expectations. Caleb's going to be a guy who's going to end up going first overall. But some guys think his arm's better. Some guys think from the aspect, sort of the leadership aspect of having to be a player last year, had to win that job, like gut it out, win the job. This year, if you watch the first game, he's down a receiver, right? He's got to transfer receivers now on the field that should be on the field. And yet when you watch him play, like he's just going out there and he's making like NFL throws left and right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think
his
he
body,
trusts,
like,
right.
Yeah.
The one that I tweeted out one where it was just like, he's running, and he throws across his body. It was just a sick throw.
Yep.
Like, you're like, oh my God, like this is exactly what you want in an NFL player. He probably trusts his arm a little too much at times. And I also think, it's like when personnel guys sit down, and they look at the roster around them, they're going to go, how many NFL guys are on this roster? How many guys are on USC's roster, NFL guys? And how much is each player elevating these other players to new levels? They're going to like that about Drake Maye. He's elevating a lesser roster. And honestly, even times when Mac Brown makes some interesting coaching calls, like not using timeouts at the end of the first half. And you're like,
he's
so
so
even from
old
a coaching,
school and just he's
bro.
just Mac Brown. He's a legend. Mac Brown does what Mac Brown wants.
Yeah. I think Maye, to me, as long as he doesn't get hurt and have like some kind of Will Levis, like just, he's putting the ball in a spot all the time where he shouldn't, which I don't think is going to happen, should be a clear, 102 next year. I'd be surprised.
100%. Yeah. And then just kind of going through that, the 103, Marvin Harrison Jr., that is, there's some concern after this last weekend.
Yeah.
He got hurt. He got shaken up a little bit. That's part of the concern. That even if he's healthy, that quarterback room, if any of you guys watched the Ohio State game, was atrocious. It did not look good. It's definitely not what we're used to seeing from Ohio State quarterback play. And so the question I have really for all three of you guys is, does Marvin Harrison Jr. even risk it? Or does he just do what Jamar Chase did? Does he do what his teammate last year did, JSN, and just sit out the season? He has nothing to prove to anyone. What do you guys think about that?
I really want to hear Charles's answer first. So there you go.
Well, look, when Ohio State's pro day happened this year, right? And I was checking in with the GM who was there, and he was like, "Best guy here, we can't even touch." like Marvin Harrison's killing it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is killing it. They're like, this kid's unbelievable. There are guys who are like, he's the best receiver since Randy Moss. Like that's how good he is. That's how complete he is. Now look, it's interesting because I do think some of this is predicated on can he stay healthy, and then how much does the quarterback change affect him? Like from a character standpoint, are we going to start to see some cracks here? Because at Ohio State, it's been nothing but wide open window throws for quarterbacks, clean pockets, all these different things. Right. So when we see the adversity, what teams start to focus on, particularly at the wide receiver position, is man, these are the guys who pop off first. Like they get pissed first when they're not getting the ball. They get pissed first when the quarterback's getting hit. Or he's dropping his eyes. And so if he stays clear of all of that and he stays healthy, I think even if he had a subpar numbers season, he would get the credit of, you know what, like it's just either something's wrong.
Still a freak, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And here's the thing: we all know the same thing happens. Like even let's say he had like 800-yard season, 8 touchdowns, something. Where he's not going to be like a Heisman candidate. He's going to go and he's going to work out. He's going to run and he's going to catch it. And people are going to go, it's the third pick. Man. Like that's like.
And Charles, something that we've said before, just kind of amongst us three, but I'm curious what like your thoughts are. A take we have is as soon as he steps into the NFL, you have Jamar Chase, you have Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, in no particular order. But as soon as he is drafted onto a team, he is probably going to be the dynasty wide receiver 3. Curious of like your thoughts on that, just because I think him stepping in, I don't see who else.
That's a Davis Dillon take.
He dished that off so quickly. Josh dished that off so quickly.
I don't want my name on that.
I own that.
I will say it's the show's take because 2 out of 3 of us believe it, but me personally, he shouldn't be in my opinion. Charles, are you on my side or their side with that?
Okay, well, first question is, it's just like, do you keep Dak Prescott or not? Well, if you don't, what's the other option? So my first question to you is, who is it, if not Marvin Harrison, who's wide receiver 3? I need that answer.
That's my exact point. Yeah.
Garrett Wilson.
Okay, so Garrett Wilson. Okay. Garrett Wilson, now you're sitting there and you're staring at it and you go, might have 1 or 2 more years of Rodgers. Maybe Rodgers plays 3 years. I mean, who knows at this point? But it's still, Rodgers is what he is. He's an aging quarterback. He does not like to get hit. We don't know how much longer he's going to stay in the league, no matter how much he's having fun. then you're thinking about Zach again, because that if Rodgers leaves after the next 2 years, he's going to be there at least 2 years. They're going to turn back into Zach as long as Zach has developed, continue to kind of refine himself right now. So I think you got to look at quarterback. You have to look at front office. You have to go, do I have confidence? And even if the quarterback position is unsettled, is it a good front office? Can they figure it out? Can they go and get the quarterback now? So let's say you're staring at the Jets, right? And you're saying, well, do I want Garrett Wilson or do I want Marvin Harrison Jr.? Depends where Harrison Jr. is. Depends who the quarterback is. And then you're looking at Garrett Wilson. You're going, yeah, but you're looking at Garrett Wilson. You're going, okay. So it's the front office that drafted Zach. Okay. And admittedly, like in the rear view, probably would have wanted to sit Zach a year and they didn't do it. Maybe they learned that lesson. But once they knew they had to resolve the quarterback situation, what did they do? They went out and resolved it meaningfully. So you kind of know I can count on if they have a Super Bowl window, and they should. I mean, that team is so young, and
especially
they
that
should.
Defense, man.
Yeah.
That defense is unbelievable.
Oh, they could be the best defense in the league this year. I mean, they could be. I doubt they reach the levels of. They're still a little young to reach their ceiling, but I mean, like in a year from now, if they keep it,
boom.
Yeah, you're talking super high level, like defining a 10-year span, kind of decade defense.
Broncos in 15 kind of thing.
And right. So, I mean, those are all things that you're thinking about Wilson. Plus, you're going to see, does Wilson have another year of development? What does he look like this year? Does he take a big step forward? Does he stay healthy? So I think it's a good debate to have. The problem is with like Marvin Harrison Jr., it's just like he's clearly going to be going to a bad team, unless something weird happens where it's like a Seattle ends up, last year with a high pick, or like Detroit ends up with a high pick. And then, it's the confidence of the front office and what quarterback he's paired with. I would not want to take wide receiver 3 if he is saddled with who's the worst quarterback in the league right now.
The Cardinals. Just the Cardinals.
Baker Mayfield.
I mean, if the Cardinals get Caleb Williams. Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. I mean, like if he really though, if he ended up in Tampa, right, wouldn't you kind of be like, I don't know, man. Like that's a pretty messed up situation because they put themselves in a situation where after Tom, they were looking at Trask versus Baker. Okay. And they, just some of the other things that they looked at Josh Rosen for a minute and the guys out of the league. They look at, So,
yep. So I want your opinion on something, Charles. We've talked about this. We talked about this on, I think 2 episodes ago, about the term generational, right? And I did kind of a breakdown of what I consider generational. And one of the guys that I think is generational and what got that conversation even sparked was Marvin Harrison Jr. So from a fantasy standpoint, we describe Bijan as generational and Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison. And you're starting to hear this term become more and more popular. Based off of our definition of what that is, it's for me, it's more of like an instinctual, a fundamental, an athleticism, and all of that wrapped into one. But the instinctual really being the part that drives that. From an NFL standpoint, when they're saying, hey, we want to go get this guy because he's generational, what does that mean?
It's a player that you just feel like you don't see come into the league in a decade. I think it's a decade. I really do. Like guys will tell you, it's the best guy in 20 years. Everybody always wants to say that crap. Like I really truly think it's like 10 years. If you're sitting there and you're staring at it, you're going, Marvin Harrison is better than any of the wide receivers we've come into the league in the last 10 years. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. That's a generational player, right? Like with the level those guys are playing at right now, you would say this is a guy who's going to potentially be a perennial all-pro player. He's going to be, he's going to have seasons where he could be offensive player of the year. If it's a quarterback, he could be an MVP. To me, that's what I think in terms of decades. There's a lot of hyperbole in the NFL where guys like to say they're thinking in like 20 or 30 year. They're really not. Like they're, and I discovered that when Trevor Lawrence came out. Like it was like Trevor Lawrence is like the greatest quarterback we've seen, blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, I guess like in terms of coming in from a refined standpoint and what he did on the collegiate level, but he's not better than Mahomes. He's not better. Like I can go down the list. There's easily like 3 or 4 guys you can argue that are better now and may have projected out a better long term. So, generational. What's a generation? What's the definition of a generation now? There's an actual there's like a definition of it, like how many years a generation.
It seems like it's getting smaller and smaller.
It seems like a 25-year window. I feel like it's like a 25 to 30-year window.
But you guys know why? It's because we have social media and we have like everything. It's like the news window used to be a day. Now it's like a minute. It's like
that's why it's so important Yeah, to define that term though, because of
I agree.
generational getting thrown around so much, especially as dynasty players. Like if you hear this player's generational, it's like, okay, well, I need to assess him adequately, and I don't want to. Is he actually generational? Like me personally, I do not think Bijan Robinson is generational. I don't. I think he's a great running back. I think he's a great prospect. I do not think he's generational at the running back position.
Do you not think he's generational because he's not on your roster? If he was on your roster,
I've never heard you say that. New news.
Genuinely,
if he was on your roster, would he be generational?
New news.
No, that's not how. New news, and yes, that's probably unpopular opinion, but I think so. Charles, for you, would you consider the likes of Bijan Robinson, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. are those guys all generational talents?
Again, I'm with you. I need to know what the definition of generational is.
Here's the clear definition thanks to Google.
Okay,
it's 20 to 30 years. So 25 years, which I called it earlier.
Google,
I guess I was correct.
Okay, so we'll split the difference. 25 years.
25 years.
25 years. I would not say.
I want to use your NFL definition of 10. Like NFL definition of 10 years. Are there any players that meet your criteria mixed with Dylan? Like, would you plant a flag on a generational talent for any of the guys coming out that he just?
I think Caleb. Like watching Caleb, seeing him do it in 2 different programs.
Yep.
Seeing the multitude of different things that he brings to the table, seeing the leadership, and in a weird way, like honestly, seeing him on commercials and being like, oh, he kind of seems like an NFL vet right now. Like he like, I know it sounds weird, but it's like he's not like a wooden figure. You're like, oh, he seems very relaxed in this. It doesn't feel big, right? Like it's not too big for that guy. And then you see what the talent is on the field. Marvin Harrison Jr. I just lean on what I can't do anything but lean on what the league guys say. I've seen so many good wide receivers come through that it blows my mind that he just like leapfrogs to the top. And I'm like, are we prisoners of now? Like, is it like it's the guy in front of us and that's who? So, I would say like Caleb to me, Bijan, in the last 10 years in running backs,
there's some.
I mean, coming in, honestly, like coming in, yeah, he's pretty. I would say considered coming in, he's a pretty generational player. Like he's one of those guys where everywhere you went, they're like the grades through the roof. They're like, but you know what Saquon was too. The grade for Saquon was through the roof. The workout for Saquon was through the work. He was a generational player too. And then what happened? He got hurt. He got like beat up. And so
shows the volatility of the position though. So
yeah, it does. But it's funny because when there are still guys in the league who you talk to now, even some younger guys who are younger than me, who will tell you when you look at tape, purely on tape, they're like, if you go all the way back to 1980 and you look at all the greatest quarterbacks and you ask them to rank them, they'll coming in, like pure talent coming in, they'll still say Elway's one. They're like, all those guys, Peyton, every single other guy who's been through the league, they're like, in terms of the sheer talent of the player coming into the league, like Elway would grade out bigger and better than almost anybody you've ever seen. Which is wild to me because I'm like, like I love Elway, great player, all-time top 10 quarterback. I'm sure, no, like question about it. But it's just weird because I have the focus of like what he looked like in the league, and but these are just like people are like, if you just looked at college tape and what he brought to the table. If Elway existed now, you would trade 4 first-round picks to get that guy, at the number 1.
Yeah.
Oof. Man, all I'm saying is all this 24 talk. I am like the king of FTP, right? F them picks. That's totally my motto. And Charles, you're in a league with us. It's in every league. I'm really, really regretting getting rid of a 24 first, and I traded a 24 first for a quarterback, which save that for another pod. But I'm really regretting it because of how strong this class is. And I know we say this after every class, and Josh, you're going to get on me for this, but 24 is looking like one of the best classes that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say.
Charles is so.
I know. I'm like talking. I'm talking his love language right now. But I mean, just from there's so many quarterbacks. We talked about Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jordan Travis, Michael Penix Jr. Like we didn't even get into
Shadur
Sanders, and then there's the running backs that are just tanks like Raheem Sanders and all those guys, and then we got Keon Coleman and Marvin Harrison Jr. Like there's so many good prospects in this class that I just want like the listeners, like the season's about to start, and you're going to find out very, very quickly if you were a contender or not. do not wait. Do not wait. Do not get behind the ball. If there's any sign that you're going to be even middle tier and there's an opportunity for you to get 24 first, commit to the tank. This class is going to be worth it. And I'm sure Charles would advocate for that because he did that. He put his money where his mouth is, but it is very much worth it to go and get picks in this class.
But I'll be honest with you, I kind of knew it. Like I knew it from having I'm always like a year ahead in terms of when I'm talking to NFL guys about the draft.
And I'm telling you, just say something real quick.
I'm just telling you, I kind of knew what I was doing.
Charles, as soon as you started picking players up on like waiver wires, guys that I never heard, I literally was going to my other leagues and I was putting claims in. So just for the listeners, anytime Charles picks up somebody for 0 fab, I'm like, what is this guy up to? So then I'll shoot him a text like, hey, Charles, man, like, what do you know? What do you know? Like, why did you just pick up Tom Brady? Is Tom Brady coming back? Like, why did you pick up Brady?
To build off of that dynamic, obviously yacht club's our main thing, but we had just started Cartel and we were learning to get to know you, and you were giving us like draft updates and draft insights 10 minutes before things happened. Davis was sending that in the yacht club chat, acting like it was his stuff, and being like, "Look, I was
he thinks he's an NFL insider. Like, he vicariously lives through you."
Like Davis is like,
I am the insider of the insider.
He will never admit it. He will never admit it. You're a low-key idol of his, I'm sure.
The COVID year, it was funny. I actually got in trouble, like because the COVID year they did the draft. They didn't do it in person. Remember, they did it like Roger wearing the sweater, the fireside chat stuff. Right?
Jerry Jones in his yacht. That's where we got it.
Had the manufactured booze in.
Yeah. The way that was set up, everybody in the league, all the decision makers, basically the people handing the card, they were all on one collective Zoom, right? So everybody's in the room together. They're all in the room. So I had somebody who's in the room, and they're feeding me who the picks are going to be. They're like, okay, this is who's coming. This is who's coming. And the broadcast is like way behind. Like it's like 3 picks behind.
Wow.
So I'm calling out picks. So I got to about halfway through the first round, and I won't say who, but somebody from the league office hit me up, and he was like, okay, we're going to find out who it is that's tipping. Like, who's telling you what's going on in this room? Just know we know, and we're gonna track it down. And I was like, "Is this a threat? Like, you threatening me right now?" Like, yeah. Like, I was like, "All right, I gotta stop doing this. Like, I can't."
All right, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
So that was awesome. The best year ever in terms of like tipping stuff. But like, I've gotten you have teams will tell you they're like completely 100% on a player, and you totally believe it, and then you just get smoked when the draft comes. And I. Thankfully, I'm not the only one. One time I was embedded with a team and a very well-known NFL draft personality. I'm not going to say, or NFL personality, not NFL draft, NFL personality, very well-known, household name. We're in the room together. They're coming up on the pick. Screw it. I'll say who the pick was. Baltimore's pick's coming up, right? And he just yells out, so confident, they're not taking Flacco. I talked to them. They're not going to take Flacco. Literally, like 30 seconds later, Joe Flacco. And I was like, oh, damn. I'm like, maybe don't yell stuff. I was like, maybe Sean Payton don't start dogging Nathaniel Hackett yet. Like, wait until you know.
For real, though.
Well, Charles, you are a delight to have on the show, obviously. You're somewhat of a delight to play with. I don't like that you've cornered the market on 24. Figured this out this quick, but we want to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for giving us some insight into what's going on in the league. Guys, any last questions or thoughts for Charles before we let him go and jump below deck?
No, thanks, man. We appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and sharing your insight. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate you guys being kind, but everybody knows I'm getting prison sexed this year, okay? Like, my team is absolutely going to get drilled.
Thank you for Elijah Moore. Thank you for Elijah Moore.
My final request is, can you send me 324 first for Deshaun Watson?
I won't, but I will tell you a player to keep, okay?
Who?
I'll give you a moment. Okay, I was never going to tell you this, but I'll tell you. So I'm going through Rams camp, and I'm like, talking to McVay. I'm like,
oh no,
Puka Nacua.
They're like,
Charles, if you say Puka Nacua, you're ruining a trade I have going on right now.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm killing your trade.
I'd love to hear this. Come on, Charles, give it to me.
Listen, they're like, this kid Puka has been in Cooper's hip pocket the entire time he's been in here. They're like, this kid, they're like, the skill set's there. There's like all this stuff. So, now, I will say this. They're like, we got to keep him on the effing field. They're like, he couldn't stay on the field in college. They're like, I don't know if we can keep him on the field in the NFL. Huge concern. Obviously, what happens, he gets hurt in during camp. But that is a player who,
good to know.
If we're
good
talking about, and immediately, like as soon as I'm like hearing this, I'm like, let me check this out. I'm like, who's got? I'm like, damn it, Davis. I'm like, Davis has got him hard, and I'm like, I'm not even
get a deal.
I'm like, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, how can I ask Davis about one guy? But what I really want is to get I'll be like, what about a wide receiver? You got a wide receiver? You want to throw in like a low
throw in?
Maybe. Yeah. This is unfortunate. I'm gonna have to make sure. I'm gonna edit this part out until I get a deal done with the Puka Nacua owner in Yacht Club, because
you just bleep his name out.
Yeah,
you bleep his name out. You bleep the team out.
Well, Charles, thank you again for joining us. We hope to have you again sometime, because I was learning so much as we went, and once again, a pleasure. When we come back, guys, going to take a quick break. We're going to go below deck, give you all the updates from the Palm Springs trip. Welcome back in. We just had Charles Robinson, NFL insider, with us, and guys, I don't know about y'all, but I was aghast. I felt like there was just such a wealth of knowledge. I was a little bit flabbergasted at how much he gave us. He touched on Hopkins. He touched on Mike Evans. He touched on Cooper Kupp. So much fantasy advice to be extracted from that conversation. But listen, we're here because of our origin story, the Yacht Club, and it would be remiss. We had a Palm Springs special episode recorded live from the owners' meeting and party. We had so much go down this weekend, and nothing sticks out more to me. Davis, this has nothing to do with fantasy. I just want to flex where I can because I'm taking to 25. After almost killing a fellow league mate on hole number 3 by mishitting my 3-wood,
good Lord,
60 miles, probably like more than 60 miles an hour. That ball was going 90 miles an hour. He drove up ahead, but he thankfully reached down to check his phone for some Michigan football. So football saves lives.
Gosh.
Ball went.
It literally does save lives.
Ball went through the front windshield. Oh yeah,
yes.
It wasn't that bad. He started driving through the course ill-advised. Yeah, but it was towards the fairway. It was a miss.
He was just driving through the middle of the fairway.
It was not anywhere near the fairway. It was directly.
Let's not aim for the fairway and hit someone on a car.
That is not a.
It was to the right. It was to the. It would have been in the rough.
Like 700 yards. I don't think.
That's besides the point, though. Josh is going to go on and tell us.
Turned it on in the back nine. Turned it on in the back nine, and our team was able to take home the dub. And then also the trade that I outlined with Michael Smith, specifically George Pickens, my boy.
Josh, I'm proud of you, because you doing that trade, it's like a toxic relationship. I feel like now that you're finally broken up with George Pickens,
freedom.
You can move on with your life. You can move on. It's exactly what happened to me involuntarily. It's like
with T. Higgins,
my ex-girlfriend cheated on me. That's more like what it's like, because I didn't want to give up T. Higgins, but it opened up the door for me. But for you, this is a new beginning for you. So how do you feel now that you're picking single?
Well, I'll explain that in just a second. But can you tell people, we've teased it a couple times, what really happened with T. Higgins? Because you've mentioned it. T. Higgins was on your team last year and arguably your best receiver, one of your most valuable players.
The most valuable player on my team. So I'll give the quick rundown. Davis is manipulative, and I was out of the country. Right? I was out of the country. It was my wife and I's anniversary. We were in Paris. We're on a completely different time frame. This is the middle of the football season. I have a co-owner. My co-owner was feeling frisky, right? He's like, you know what? We were in some negotiations for, I think it was Ramondre Stevenson at the time. And I go to bed. I talk to my co-owner. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's talk. Let's pick it up in the morning, whatever. I just put my phone aside. I'm going to sleep whenever everyone else is waking up. I wake up the next morning to Davis texting me saying, what is it? Something about T. You some pun with T in it, T. Higgins. And I was like, what is he talking about? I open the Sleeper app and see that T. Higgins was traded. T. Higgins and a first, the only first that I had, was traded for Ramondre Stevenson. I don't remember the entire trade. I tend to just try to forget that part of.
You try to block that off in your memory?
I block it off completely, but basically gave up a fortune. T. Higgins, our future. And what I will say is, like I said, it was a new beginning for me, because our team has completely turned around since then, and T. Higgins would not be the best player on our team currently. So that's why I ask you, Josh. It was a revelation for us as Bad's Dynasty. But for you, how does it feel?
Hold up real quick. Hold up. I can't just have you claiming.
No. You don't get to. No. You don't get. I don't want to hear any fabrications. No fabrications.
I get to defend myself.
Oh my gosh.
I get to defend myself. Just give me one rebuttal real quick. Your co-owner, Trey, was irresponsible and came to me about the deal. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I said, does Dylan know about this? Does Dylan know? And mind you, I will read the trade off right now.
What did he say? What did he say when you asked if I knew about it?
T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, a 24 first and a 23 second for Ramondre Stevenson and a 23 first at the time. So yes, I got a haul. Wasn't my fault. Don't be mad at me. And when I said
I was out of the country.
But but that's not my fault. Don't put the responsibility and the co-ownership into somebody that is not responsible, because he said no, but he'll be proud of me for doing this. He said no, but he'll be proud of me for doing this.
To add some context, Dylan called me and was like, "Hey, please tell me this is a practical joke, man. You guys are messing with me." I said, "Dylan."
He thought that we were going to reverse it.
I've looked at the rules. There's nothing I can do. I'm really, really sorry, bro.
I legit thought you guys were trolling. Like, hey, let's punk Dylan. He's out of the country. Trey was playing along with it, my co-owner. And for even more context, my co-owner is one of my best friends. So the fact that he thought that I was going to be stoked on that, I'm just so disappointed.
Well, I'm glad that you're on to better places. And Josh, it seems now that with this George Pickens trade, you were on to better places. But it doesn't seem like that was the only deal that happened. What was the other major trade that happened in our league?
There was a couple that were really close to happening. But the one that really stole the show, in my opinion, was a 3-way trade. And I got to say, the league has amped up. The podcast has been released. Guys know, hey, I've got to step up my game. I've got to make splash moves where owners kind of were in the middle, a little bit more hesitant to make a splash move.
Yep.
A lot of them got off the bench and were like, we are going to make moves. Exactly. So Davis had actually, I think, gone to sleep at this point. It was almost like, all right, he's gone, because the teams that were trying to make trades are the teams
People
that want to
fear
beat
me
him.
so much. I'm
having
conversations.
It's not fear.
Hold up. I need to give real quick, Josh. I will let you go back, but I do need to give the listeners and the viewers an inside scoop into. I'm sitting at the pool, just having a casual conversation with one of my league mates. And I may or may not have been talking to him about a deal. And I literally see somebody viewing me from afar. And they're like, wait, is there a deal going on over here? They come and they plop down next.
It's like Survivor.
Because they are going to protect the person that I'm talking to. Like, I am going it baffles me, but it also is probably the best compliment that I can ever get. So Josh, I'll let you get back to it.
No, totally. So essentially a 3-way trade formed, and a team that's really good in making a push this season had some extra 24 firsts. They were trying to trade with a team that had most of the 24 firsts and had Mark Andrews as one of their last pieces to rebuild with. But the firsts were a little bit later, and the team that had Mark Andrews wanted JSN. The team that had JSN is kind of in the middle and is like, I need to rebuild. I know I'm like, maybe I could make playoffs, maybe I couldn't. It took an immense amount of convincing. People were yelling at the JSN owners like, you're delusional. You have no shot this year. You're not even rebuilding. You're just hanging on to your players emotionally. And then all of a sudden he was like, screw it. And he hit accept. And literally all 3 franchises ran to the center of the room and were cheering. And we're like, yeah, we did it. That was the night.
That was pretty monumental.
How everyone's feeling after waking up to the change in their roster. Dylan, you saw the trade. Did you feel there was a clear winner, or was this one of those 3-way trades where everyone mutually benefited?
You know, I think there was actually, I don't think there was one winner. I think there were 2 winners and 1 loser. I think the loser of the trade was the one who traded away JSN, the owner that traded away JSN. He got 2 firsts in return, which you think is great, but we're in a 14-team league and those are both projected to be late. I personally don't think, and that team is also just kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I don't really know. I don't understand the direction, but 2 late firsts for JSN just doesn't feel like a good trade-off when you don't know what he can be. He was still a first-round pick. The team still invested in him. Whereas there was, who was it? It was Mark Andrews was acquired for basically those 2 firsts.
Those 2
That's
firsts,
a win.
yeah.
2 firsts for Mark Andrews. Like, I would
Late
2 late
firsts.
firsts for Mark Andrews. Absolutely. That's a smash for me. I don't know if you guys just, would you trade?
No,
for that
for
team,
Mark
team,
Andrews?
it's
Yes,
great.
right. That's a
especially
smash.
when like that's your one position that's holding you back from really
lacking,
being into the top tier. Absolutely smash
Right.
trade. But Josh, or to your point, Dylan, and to what we just spoke about with Charles, with the 2024 class and him saying, okay, if you have some of the top 16 prospects, like it is a deep class and it is a star-studded class. Granted, we are still far from the draft happening. So we could look back and we could look at it like next year, like, okay, you know what? That was a win-win-win trade for everybody that was involved. And so, no, I actually
do you really want to
trade.
re-roll the dice, though? Like, I mean, would Jason just feel like you're re-rolling the dice?
That's fair.
Here's what I'll say, though. How much further could JSN have gone up in value? Another first, 3 firsts, maybe a higher end first.
No, you could have, right? Yeah, higher end. That's what I was gonna say. You could have flipped him maybe next year during the draft or something for a higher first. Because right now you're re-rolling the dice and hoping that a landing spot works out where those 2 later first you can get 2 shots at a JSN. I don't know.
Here's all I'll say. Go ahead, Davis.
No, go.
No. You.
You guys are so kind.
We're getting along so well.
That was so cute.
Palm Springs.
The viewers and listeners they are probably like, wow, these guys are best friends now. We hate this. We want them to be opponents and rivals. No, I do want to ask you guys briefly, and I will keep it short, but I want you guys to understand an offer that has been put out that was talked about again this past weekend. And it was a hypothetical offer, but it felt like it should have been a smash accept. I had offered at one point to an owner who's a competitor, has Justin Jefferson, but doesn't have a ton of depth. I had offered Calvin Ridley, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Dalton Kincaid, a 24 first, a 25 first, and 2 24 seconds for Justin Jefferson. I want to ask you guys
for Justin Jefferson.
For just Justin Jefferson, and this weekend he then turns to me. He's like, "Hey man, I do just want to say to you, if it was any other owner, I would have accepted it, but league principle held me to not do it." So, at what point does not doing something that
we're taking the Davis tax global?
Bro, but that tax is just dumb. Think of all that.
I'm going to have to verify that you actually sent that trade. Did you talk about that trade?
No. Verify it, and we'll follow up on that.
I will say, like, about that trade, I feel like I would do that. Given that manager's team, like, it makes sense. Like, in Justin Jefferson, as untradeable as he is, all of those assets, 100%. So that is right. But Davis, I also do understand that manager's philosophy on the Davis tax. It's like I said, it's a global statement now. Like, you got to overcome that. I feel bad for you, not really, but it's
I don't think it's so much just because it's Davis. I think it's also looking at Davis's team, because that owner you just described is also the owner who just traded for Mark Andrews. They have a team that can compete. It's a little bit thin in depth, very thin, I would say, in depth in certain areas, like Davis was saying. But you don't want to give someone a championship. As cool as it is to say, "Hey, I got a bunch in return," when you give Davis's team a Justin Jefferson,
Christian McCaffrey.
Hey, we're going there.
Right.
I may have
give
done
a team that's strong. It's like, yeah, this may sound cool in a year or two, but I think I have a shot this year, and I'd rather try to beat you even if I'm an underdog. So that's what I love about our league is we got a bunch of dogs in there who are going to fight to the end no matter what. Unlike me, who's just tanking for 25. But Davis, Dylan, you were unable to join us because you're being an amazing husband and you had your anniversary weekend. How dare you support healthy marriages and not our degenerate ways? But Davis, any other highlights before we let the viewers go from Palm Springs? Any thoughts to leave them with?
Highlights and thoughts is we are just getting started with this league. And there's going to be so much that I think you as viewers and you as listeners can look forward to, not just from our league, but from this podcast and kind of what we're doing. We're going to be showing you, on Twitter, on Instagram. Please go follow all of those. Go follow the Inflection Network YouTube channel. But there are so many things that are going to be happening in this next year that are exciting. And we're just kicking off NFL in 3 days, and literally my wife is dreading that day. I told her Sunday, I'm going to wake up with you. I'm going to say hi to you at night. I'm going to go to bed with you and say good night to you. But I am gone, and I'm sitting on my couch, and I am going to be literally giddy as a child. But no, guys, we are so excited for you all to be on this journey, and I'm excited to be doing this podcast with you two fine gentlemen.
Love it, Dylan. Was there any other FOMO that you missed out on from being in Palm Springs? Was there a trade you tried to get done and live vicariously through us while you were being husband of the year?
Honestly, no. I mean, Mike and I are always talking on low. Neither of us were there, but I had some conversations with Mike. Nothing came to fruition. But no, man, I was bummed that I missed out. Like, that's one of the best times of the year. We all get together and chop it up, and trades will get done. It's inevitable. Like, that is we like, I know the audience probably thinks we're exaggerating. Like, no, that is our owners meeting. That is where we're face to face, all of us face to face at once. Trades get done. So no, I just like to echo Davis's sentiment. I'm stoked that we're doing this. And for the listeners, like, to get an insight of our league, like, we are like on Twitter, we're during the season are active. We've got some things that are pretty cool that kind of link to our league and kind of get you a little bit of insight on what we're doing. So if you want to follow those things, but yeah, I mean, this is just one of the best league that I'm in, the best league in the world. And so I'm excited to be a part of it in this podcast.
America's Dynasty League, no question. Guys, as Davis said, we are just getting started, but the next time we record, we will be reacting to actual NFL games. I am so excited. I can't get to sleep soon enough so I can wake up and be one day closer. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Dynasty Exchange. Until next time.